Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you by the great folks over at Montana's. Montana's is bringing back the viewing party. My co-host and I head out to the Tsawwassen Mills location of Montana's Barbecue and Bar. Check out their comfort menu. We ordered the mac and cheese. We had some spin dip. It was a good time, so be sure to go check out Montana's 7 locations across British Columbia. We're getting right to it today. My name's David Quadrelli. I'm joined, as always, by the man who built the place, Chris Faber. And Chris, do you want to address why we're doing this remotely today?
You can do it.
My co-host, as has become tradition on some days, you've seen it on Halford and Bruff. You've seen it on this show a few times. For all the crap I used to get about being late to your place to do the actual show, you've been sleeping in, man, and it has been unbelievable. I was texting, and we'll get to the poll question later. There's a couple poll questions today. But I was texting with your fiance about it, and neither of us could really believe that you were still sleeping at 11:30 in the morning. She told me that you had an 8:15 alarm set. So what do you have to say for yourself here?
Well, that 8:15 alarm was absolutely useless. It definitely went off, and I just... I don't know. I turned it off and I just went back to sleep for a little bit because I was like, I was looking at my phone and I was setting timers. I was setting like 15-minute timers for like, just another 15 minutes. Yeah, that was ridiculous. But I was up late. I was up till like 3:30 last night. Luckily, I prepped the entire show. Didn't do any graphics, but at least like the outline was done. At some point last night, I'll just be honest. I was watching Elias Pettersson, like the new Pettersson, because I wanted to get all these clips for him. I probably watched like 6 games of Elias Pettersson last night on top of watching 2 episodes of MILF Manor, and I got caught up on that as well as Elias Pettersson highlights. So I look up and like my microwave clock is the only one that you can see in the living room, and I see that it's like 3:38, and I was like, oh no. I was like, I have made a horrible mistake. So yeah, that's what happened last night. And then somehow, that's the weird thing, is normally I sleep for like 6 hours, sometimes 7 on a good night. I slept for 8 hours straight last night, aside from waking up at like 8 o'clock there to turn my alarm off. Like I got actually an 8-hour like night of sleep, which I think is what you're supposed to get, right? Like 8 hours.
Yes, that is normal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what I got last night. And now I feel horrible because I feel so tired still from like oversleeping and actually getting an 8-hour sleep. I feel horrendous. I just tried to do our Betway videos and recorded that. I look like a raccoon. So I think my eyes have gotten a little bit better up to this point, but I hate sleeping for 8 hours because now I just feel bad for the rest of the day. Yeah, people are giving it to me.
That'll happen. Yes, people in the chat are giving you a hard time, and I would say rightfully so. We've got some listeners from Austria. Shout out Maxwell for tuning in, Austrian listener, joining us on the show today. Chris, where do you want to start? I'll let you kind of drive the bus here because you've done so much prep as you did last night.
I felt like I did such a good job of like getting some ideas to talk about on the show. I wanted to get this right out off the top. Like I wrote it as on the ticker there. I know Alex loves that thing. He's mad at me today for being late. No graphics. He's mad at you too for the graphics. Alex is having a busy day today on Thursday, and he's jealous that you're off tomorrow. Anyways, close to being
I've heard of these quads graphics. I haven't seen any quads graphics on this show.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Quads has got his graphics on the socials there, but I haven't seen one graphic on the show. That's for damn sure. We'll see if that ever comes. But watching last night's game, Quads yesterday for the first time when I was watching the Rangers game. Oh yeah, on top of that, I watched this game twice last night. I watched it late I slept until 11:30, but I was doing a lot of work until 3:30 in the morning last night. So don't give me that crap. You just didn't want to make the SkyTrain trip over here. That's probably the problem. It's not me. Never is me the problem. But close to being fun is what I wrote, because it felt like last night, this is the first time I can say this, I think, all season long. And listen, I haven't been rooting for wins at this point. I would like to see them get the best opportunity of, being in the lottery for Connor Bedard. But last night was like the first time where the Canucks lost. And I said, okay, the Canucks can finally lose games and still be like fun to watch for Canucks fans, right? I think now that the Horvat trade's done, now that you're probably going to see some other players move on, you've seen Mikheyev get shut down. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Demko here moving forward. But last night was the first time that I felt that this team was actually fun to watch, still in a loss. When for a long time this season, you've seen a lot of these losses and they just have not been fun. They've been hard to watch. There's been situations going on around the team that have made losses even worse. But last night, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but last night was the first time that I saw a Canucks loss and was like, okay, that's fun. This is the way this team's going for the rest of the season.
I would argue, and you know, your point stands. Your point is very valid that last night was a fun game to watch. But I would argue that that game against New Jersey was even more fun. You had more shots, you had more goals. I mean, you had a 50-second collapse for the Canucks, but they made a comeback, right? Like, I think that was the time when I looked at it. And again, like I've been pretty open about the fact that I'm a pretty big fan of Rick Tocchet so far, and one of the reasons is he's talking about accountability. He's talking about effort level. Like, you can't fault these Canucks efforts right now. Like what they're turning in right now, you can't fault them for that. And I think that started with New Jersey because again, Chris, like I'll pose the question to you because when I was watching that game, I was thinking, oh, well, there's the collapse and now's the beginning of the end. Now the Canucks are going to skate it out. They're just going to finish the game. By the grace of God, this game will end. That's what's happened this season, right? Like we see the collapse, we see them blow multi-goal leads, and then they just go away quietly, right? Like how often did we hear about the unacceptable, we can't turn in a full 60-minute effort? Now, I understand this one was 58 minutes and 20 seconds or whatever, 58 minutes, whatever it was. It wasn't a 60-minute effort in New Jersey, but you get the point that it was a strong effort for the Canucks. And I think that was the game that I watched where I was like, wow, okay, like this is a different attitude. I don't want to say it's a different team because it's not, but it's a different attitude under Rick Tocchet where they're not going down quietly. They are storming back, and making things interesting in New Jersey. Like they took that team to overtime, right? And again, I know the Devils weren't at their best. Like that wasn't the best Devils performance. And I don't think they were very pleased that it even had to go to overtime. But again, like last night in New York, same sort of deal, right? Like same sort of deal where you can't really fault their effort. And again, like Tocchet called out 5 guys post game. They got burned when those guys were on the ice a few times, right? And I understand that, but I really think it started with that game in New Jersey. But your point does stand that game against New York last night, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the season, does it not?
It was the perfect like score 3 goals and lose game to me, right? Like, and Corey brought up my point that I wanted to get to right there was like Podkolzin scored. It was a low shot total. You got a goal from Elias Pettersson, and you got a goal from one of the wingers that you want to get going, right? Like Connor Garland, Podkolzin, and Pettersson were the guys who scored. That's what you want to see, like down the road, maybe it's Huglander in the lineup scoring a goal, or maybe it's, finding what you have in Phil DiGiuseppe or Dakota Joshua ended up playing better. Like these are the type of players I think you want to be, get them going. And I just thought that last night was that type of game where the young players had to step up and kind of take over. Cause I think one of the biggest challenges this Canucks team has is going to be the young guys taking over this room. Like I really think that the room wasn't great in the first place, and then you lose the guy who was the best for the room. I really think that Bo Horvat, if you looked at this locker room before the trade, he was the best guy to handle that locker room. He was the captain. I think he got along with everyone. I think he was able to, be funny and get along with every single player, whether it be the older vets or the young guys. And now I think it's going to be very difficult for that room to get kind of taken over, but the young guys need to be the ones who do it, right? It needs to be, Podkolzin winning games for you with goals or Pettersson scoring goals to keep you in games. Like that's what you saw last night, where there was a lot of positives in a loss. And it felt like earlier in the season, like think about how bad some of these losses were, where we just came in here and you're banging the table and yelling. Like you're not banging the table and yelling after last night because it was like, hey, they did a pretty good job of, slowing down the prolific offense that you have there with the Rangers. And they also did a decent job of having the young guys step up, or the guys who need to step up and raise their value score a goal. So the only other way it could have been perfect, like a little bit more perfect for me, is like a 4-5 regulation loss, and maybe Besser scores another goal in there, like get that guy going and get him some goals so that he's like some teams look at him and saying, okay, he's scoring goals now. Connor Garland's starting to play a lot better hockey of late ever since Rick Tocchet came in here. Maybe his value goes back up. So long term, like last night is the perfect loss in my eyes.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And like there's a point in the chat here that I want to make. Corey Anderson was the one that made it. He made 2 good points. He said the Quads plan a 4-day work week. I'm not even in tomorrow. Harmon Dial will be joining you tomorrow. Brought to you by Zephyr Epic. But he brought up another good point here. He said those Ranger and Devil losses equal Canucks wins with Thatcher Demko in net. I'm not saying that the goalies are at fault for these losses, and I don't think that's what Corey's trying to say. But I don't think that. And again, we're assuming, and that's a big assumption right now, coming off an injury, that Thatcher Demko is just going to return to the form we saw last season and what we started to see him going toward this season. But again, the Thatcher Demko of old that is able to steal those wins, right? Like, those are 2 Canuck wins if we're seeing Thatcher Demko play at the level he did last year. And again, I think there's kind of that worry among Canucks fans, because right now you're looking at it and you're like, damn, like, they're right there. Like, they're right there in the talks of getting at least a top 5 pick, right? And obviously everybody wants Connor Bedard more than anything, but they're right there. And again, I think there's almost that worry with Thatcher Demko returning that he's going to mask all the problems again and give this team false hope.
It's absolutely possible, right? Like, it's absolutely possible that happens. I don't think it's the idea that I think is, like, I don't see it actually playing out that way. Like, I mean, I don't think Demko's going to step right in and just be what he was last year, right? I really hope they take the extra time and really, like, what do they have to gain from rushing him back at all? And I know they've already taken some extra time, but take extra time. And just, like, even if you do want to see Demko be back to form at some point this season, but it doesn't need to be 2 weeks from now. Like, it can be a month from now when he's actually playing games. And even at that point, you're probably just doing 50-50 the rest of the season, or maybe getting Demko on a little bit of a run if you start to see him get hot. Yeah, I think that, yeah, like Corey brings up a good point. Like, those losses when you have Demko on his game, those are wins last night. And I think that'll be, like, fine in the end, because it's not like the Canucks are going to lose every game. There are going to be games where the Canucks don't have 5 players that Rick Tocchet, like, didn't like their game of. Like, there's going to be games where the Canucks play well, because the problem is inconsistency so much with this whole group, and adjusting to these new structure and style that you want to see Rick Tocchet implement with these players. There's going to be an adjustment period, which I think is going to make it difficult, and you're going to see a lot of losses. But I wonder what happens near the end of the year, like you mentioned, when Demko's back and healthy, and this team has had, enough practice time and enough time actually playing in the game and learning from their new coach, where things start to click. Like, that's what you want to get to later in the season. And maybe they're winning games at that point. Like, once they're playing a structured team, like, game, they have a really good goalie back there who's back to form. They could be winning games at the end of the year. So, like, right now during this, like, transition period, I think you could see a lot of losses. And I think that's the best thing for the Canucks when you look at the future, because it means a higher pick. If, I'm not sure if they're going to figure it out by the end of the year, but right now in this transition period, pile up the L's, because this is the time to do it in, what's somewhat, some people believe is like a silent tank here in Vancouver.
Now, I want to go back to a point that you made earlier in the show about 5 minutes ago, just about the changing of the guard with the new leadership group, right? Like, obviously, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes get A's. The guy in there, JT Miller, right? Like, let's talk about the elephant in the room here, because I believe it was last night Friedman threw out that there was talks of something with Carolina or something like that. It wasn't a big, like, report, but the kind of the thing to take away from it was there might still be a trade market for JT Miller. Now, the guys on the morning show, and I know you have no idea what I'm talking about, but the guys on the morning show, Halford and Bruff today on Sportsnet 650, were kind of throwing this around of, well, if they trade JT, what's the press conference going to be like? And they have to say, like, we backtracked. And again, like, I'm not trying to say Halford and Bruff are wrong for saying that. They're absolutely right. And again, they went on to make the point that I'm about to make, but regardless of what you can get, and I know they're going to get scrutinized if it's worse than the Hedel, Lundqvist, and a first or whatever that it was from the Rangers, right? Like, I understand they're going to get scrutinized if it's worse than that, but they're not going to get that or better at this point. I don't think. Like, I don't think there's any chance that they're getting that, even if for the simplest reason, extension aside, because we just saw what Bo Horvat got in the open market, but extension aside, if only for the simple reason that he's not scoring at a 100-point pace like he was last year when you were looking at trading him, right? So even for that simple reason, I don't think they're going to get anywhere near that return. But I got to be honest with you, Chris. Like, what's the cost that you would look at Like, at what point do you say, "Ooh, I wouldn't trade JT Miller for that"? Because I don't think, and again, like, I don't want to speak for all Canucks fans here, but first of all, I think moving JT to free up cap space and to get anything of resembling a future asset in return would be extremely well received in this market. Like, I understand there might, I'm again not trying to speak for everybody. I understand there might be people that don't like it or say this return isn't enough, or for the simplest reason of, you know what, we could have got more last year and I'm pissed at this management group for messing up this situation. I understand people might say that, but at the stage we're at, with the circumstances that the Canucks are in right now with JT Miller and, you know, everything surrounding this situation when it comes to future cap space, and again, like, I'm not saying I'm not even saying this because I think JT is a bad player this year or whatever, or that he's even going to be bad in the first 3 years of this deal. Like, I'm not trying to criticize the guy's play here when I say this. I'm more so talking about, okay, well, the Canucks have seemingly pushed back their competitive window from what they originally thought it was when they signed that contract, right? Like, again, in a vacuum, the contract's fine. Like, again, the contract is fine. JT Miller's a fine player. That being said, if the Canucks are making this organizational shift in mentality where they're no longer trying to compete this year and they want to be competitive in about 2 years' time. So let's say that next year they're still building toward being that, you know, because there's a difference between being competitive and being a Stanley Cup contender, right? And obviously the Canucks want a banner. That's what Patrick Allvin keeps saying. So if you're making this decision now and you're saying, you know what, we were a little bit wrong, people already know you made the wrong decision in terms of you thought your team was better than it was, and now you're in this disaster where the Canucks have identified themselves that they really need to have, like Rutherford said, major surgery. Like, the Canucks have seemingly identified this themselves. So I don't think them, quote unquote, backtracking on a move and saying, okay, well, we had to give up JT for, I don't know, let's say a second round pick. And again, sorry, I asked you the question, then I kept talking for about 3 minutes, but I'll pose the question again in case you've forgotten. What is the price to move JT Miller, like, to get in return, that you would say, yeah, I'm not doing that trade?
Yeah, I think if you look at it like old school hockey trade, you'd see some of the trades for Miller and be like, oh, that's not great. But I'll tell you what, if you're going off of the Canucks actually rebuilding this, I have not seen a trade proposal for JT Miller that I do not like. Right? If the Canucks are getting a return for JT Miller and they're able to utilize that cap space and utilize whatever you get back in the return, I think it's the right way for this team to actually rebuild. I mean, you want to move on from this bad money that's going to be here for a long time. And I'm not saying that, like, JT Miller might be worth his money on a team that's actually competitive and in the playoffs. And maybe he's playing first line wing or second line wing or third line center. If he's a third line center on your team and you're able to somehow afford, you know, his $8 million, like, you're probably pretty happy with what you have down the middle if you're putting him there at 3C. I just think that the way the Canucks are moving right now, I don't think they want to move on from Miller. Like, I don't think that they will, because they just signed Andrei Kuzmenko to that deal, which kind of signaled to me that they do want to retool and they do want to be better quick. But if, like, it could be interesting because everything that we've heard from them has been, you know, about the retool, about it being like a 2-year kind of fixed thing. When Jim Rutherford was asked 3 years, he said, oh yeah, much like in that time for sure. Like, you know, quicker than that, I think he said. It would be interesting if that's the messaging, but what they actually end up doing is really doing some long-term rebuilding. And I think they have, like, the potential to do it, right? Like, moving on from Miller is huge for that, because now you have all this cap space for next season. You can actually use that cap space to, I think, take on some bad money and get yourself some picks. Like, they have the potential to make this into a real legit long-term rebuild. Like, aside from the, you know, and that's if you move on from Miller and aside from the Kuzmenko deal, like, you have the potential to do it. And I really think that's the best bet. But all the messaging that we've heard has been about a retool. It would be pretty awesome if they, like, have just been telling us that they're retooling this whole time when they're actually doing a rebuild and are aware of it. Like, you know, it's not like the general manager has to come out here and tell the exact truth every time. What if they're all on the same page? Like, I know I'm thinking a little positive here, but, like, that would be
No
awesome.
kidding.
It would be great if they were actually doing a rebuild. You don't have to tell the media that you're doing a rebuild, and maybe it helps you in the long term. Like, I don't know. That's just the way that I'm looking at it, being like a positive kind of outlook towards a rebuild.
This is one of the many stages of being a Canucks fan, is Well, maybe what they're telling us is actually the opposite of what they're doing.
It's
This is many.
like the whole thing is like, I think like being a Canucks fan or us who cover the Canucks or somebody who's around the team so much, there's like a stage where you're like, are they doing 40 chest or is this just bad? And like, if they're doing like, for a long time, it has not been 40 chess, even though some people have looked at it that way and been like, no, this is what they're up to. Like, they're thinking ahead. The Jim Benning era did not have much 40 chess. It had a lot of bad moves. And the Canucks, you look at some of their things and you're like, is this 40 chess or is this not great for a rebuild? Like, I would love for it to be that move where they're like, and this is what I say this a lot. Like, we just have opinions on this team. These people that are in these spots, I think, are pretty smart hockey minds. They're likely a lot smarter than us if we were in that role, right? I think a lot of people that are in that position would be smarter than us and would be better at making decisions. I do think that. But it will be kind of difficult for this to be pulled off correctly. And we've seen it happen where you hope for 40 chess and get bad moves instead. So we've seen that in the past. I think that's why we're kind of hurt from it in the past. And those scars have not healed yet from what the Canucks have done in the past. So to believe that this is incredibly intelligent, smart thinking that's much ahead of what we believe, I stand to be like, I want to be amazed. I would like to be amazed and see them commit to a rebuild. I just don't know if it's going to happen because they have made a move like the Kuzmenko one. Like, that was a no-brainer to add a valuable asset for your future instead of re-signing him for a 2-year deal. So that like doesn't make sense to me if it is the 40 chess move of being in a true rebuild. So I don't know. But this is a stage for people who follow this team, I think. Is this 40 chess or is this bad?
People are wondering what that sound was. That was either Alex's cat or Alex dropped the fart sound on Faber again. But I shouldn't talk because the thing I keep thinking about, and again, people are wondering. Also, like we've talked about this on the Patreon, I'm getting a puppy in March, and people have requested that he come on the show. And I might have no choice, so we'll see. I might bring him on the show for a few episodes, so I shouldn't talk too much about animals getting a little too close to the mic. And we'll continue this JT Miller conversation in shows, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. But I want to get to our poll question, Chris, because I cooked this one up because you were away this morning. And I actually cooked this one up. I cooked this one up in collaboration with your fiance. Which I'm very excited about. So first, let's get the first poll question up here, Alex. The first poll question, of course, all of our poll questions, both of them today, brought to you by the great folks over at Atlas Goods. Go to atlasgds.com. Use promo code CC15 for 15% off your first order of pop rinds. These are the best fresh pork rinds straight from your microwave or air fryer. Our poll question today, our main one, we'll get to the sub poll after. Actually, you know what? Let's start on the sub poll. And then we'll get to the main poll. Well, I just thought the poll is going to have more of a conversation around it. So the sub poll question today, of course, also brought to you by Atlas Goods. Should Faber have quads and his literal fiance on his favorite callers list so that they can wake him up when he sleeps in? Alex, go ahead and vote. I want to see what Alex votes with here because I know where I voted, Chris. And I was a little bit surprised by some of the response to this. So far, 66% of voters saying yes, he should, 8% say no, 11% say just his fiance, and 15% say just quads. I was blown away that there was people voting that I should just be the only one over your fiance. I voted yes to both of us because I think, come on. First of all, I don't know how you don't have her, but second of all, I think I should also be on there. I'm not going to lie to you.
I've changed it now so that she is one of the emergency callers. She can call, but the thing with you is like the buzzer isn't at my building is an emergency contact. So if you show up here and I'm asleep, if you buzz in, I'll wake up. Like that's what I know. I'm not adding you onto the emergency list. That's for damn sure because you call me at some stupid times when I'm like in the in the locker room or something, and you call me for like 30 seconds to tell me like, hey, I just made a graphic about this, and I'll be in the locker. Like I can't have my phone buzzing off while I'm interviewing a player, so I'm not doing that. So yeah, you're not getting the emergency contact, but I know you. My fiance makes like laughs at this all the time when she when you text her. I think you text her normally like the same thing, like, do you know where Chris is? and both of you know exactly where I am. You guys both know that I'm sleeping, but you still tend to ask her. She says, do you know where Chris is? Do you know what Chris is up to? You know what I'm up to, Quads. You know exactly where I'm at. I'm in bed and I'm sleeping probably.
There was one time I asked her and she said you weren't sleeping, you were doing something, and then she said he doesn't have his phone though, so I'll tell him. So she told you. But today I texted her and I said, we need to get your fiance an alarm clock with laughing emojis. And then she said he has one and it was set for 8:15. I saw it myself. But here we are, of course. Okay, let's get to our main poll question here. I think we've done enough.
The response here is crazy. They say that both of you should be on there, 66% of people. And then 14% say just you, and then only 11 my fiance. That's not the way I'm rolling with the third highest option here. That's who's getting. She's on the emergency contact list.
Yeah, I think that's fine because
this is gonna be Quads doing the door knocking, waking Faber up.
Yeah, he needs a long stick to get up here, banging on the window. Yeah, there you go. You'll see the
little switch to camera 3.
Yeah, that's clean. You'll see the stick on that camera here, tapping away on the screen.
Okay.
All right. What's the poll?
So the voters have spoken. Let's go to the regular poll question here. What is our regular poll question? I almost forgot. I really wanted to make the sub poll question the main one, but then I was like, no, we need an actual poll question. Okay. So our actual poll question today, as I said, go get yourself some Pop Ryans. Use promo code CC15 for 15% off. Our poll question today: which winger would you most like to see with Elias Pettersson for the remainder of the season? Anthony Bovillier, Andrei Kuzmenko, Brock Besser, and of course, I'm angry, which I used as a write-in option. Nobody did a write-in. 5% of voters went with I'm angry, but none of them actually wrote in a winger who they would rather see. Obviously, Connor Garland would be on that list. You could make a case for JT Miller, but I don't think you should. Alex going with Andrei Kuzmenko, and that's the majority of voters. Chris, 66% say Andrei Kuzmenko, 20% say Brock Besser, 9% say Anthony Bovillier, and as I mentioned, 5% say they are angry. I went with Kuzmenko here. Who are you going with?
Yeah, I think I'd go with, I wish I could choose two of them here. I think I'd like to go with Kuzmenko and Besser. I think I'd like to see both of those guys be Pettersson's wingers for what I would expect is the remainder of the season. I think that trio should be playing together for the rest of the year. I think whether you're moving Besser or keeping Besser, he's here for 2 more years after this year on his contract. So you got to figure out how to get the best out of him. And saying it for a long time, I think you really got to put him in a consistent spot. It's tough to watch Brock Besser get an opportunity to play with Elias Pettersson, get one game, and then because it wasn't a great game, he's off that line, right? I think that's got to stop. I think you got to let him run for a long time. I think Kuzmenko's the easy decision here. There's been chemistry between the two players. You got Kuzmenko here for 2 more years. That's kind of the easy answer, but I think what I would say is you need both. In my eyes, Brock Besser should always be higher up in the lineup than Anthony Bovillier, right? The new guy I know you want, but Canucks also at the same time, the new guy that you get, whether it be from a call up or a trade, doesn't always need to play with Elias Pettersson. I don't think that needs to be a thing that always needs to happen for the Canucks. In my eyes, I think Besser should be higher up in the lineup than Bovillier for a lot of different reasons. And, one of them could be to pump up the value. One of them could be to maybe find the full potential of Brock Besser. I just think he should be above Bovillier in the lineup and getting a more of a chance to play with Elias Pettersson.
Okay. Quickly on this, Kuzmenko last night, obviously, called out by Rick Tocchet post-game as being one of the guys. He said he was just spinning around, Tocchet said of Kuzmenko. And Kuzmenko, obviously, I think he recorded just over 12 minutes of ice time. He was benched, basically. Brock Besser moving up to that line with Anthony Bovillier and Elias Pettersson. I found this really interesting, Chris, because you just made the case for Besser. Besser last night in Corsi percent. And the stats with Mike Liu, Canucks Army's analytics-based post-game report. I was reading it this morning as I was editing it, of course, and I was really interested because last night someone asked me just, hey, what have you thought of Bovillier? And my eye test, at least, just watching the games, what I saw is, his foot speed isn't great, but you can see him doing good things along the walls, right? I was seeing stuff like that, and I was like, okay, that's fine, but Again, we say the same thing about Tanner Pearson, and you would hope that Bovillier is better than Tanner Pearson, obviously. But that being said, reading into it a little more, and again, looking at the advanced stats and stuff, Bovillier was really good. He had the best expected goals for of any Canuck on the team, and he was very, very good alongside Elias Pettersson. And I was really surprised to hear that stat. That being said, I've also noticed that maybe Bovillier's finishing isn't the best. Like, he's been set up for some chances by Elias Pettersson that I was kind of like, you got to bury that. I think there's been at least two through the first two games as a Canuck. And again, I don't have the timestamps. I don't have any clips. I'm just saying when I watch this player, that's kind of what I've seen. Is I've said, like, I've seen a few times where I'm like, okay, well, Kuzmenko might finish that, but Bovillier is having trouble. So again, like, I know Bovillier didn't pick up a lot of votes. I voted Kuzmenko because I would like to see the guy that you've signed for 2 years actually play with Pettersson. But I think this all goes to a bigger conversation about why we warn against loading up on wingers, right? Like, why you don't corner the market on wingers, and why it was probably the best idea to trade Kuzmenko when you could have gotten a first and at least a first plus, right?
Yeah.
It kind of speaks to that larger conversation. Again, I know it's one bad game and I'm not trying to overreact or anything. I'm just saying that, look, like, here we are talking about Bovillier being like, oh, he's playing great. He's playing alongside Elias Pettersson, right? Like, everybody plays pretty well when they're alongside Elias Pettersson. And I think, like, what the Canucks really needed was a stopgap, right? Like, while they build. And I just don't think Kuzmenko's a stopgap. I think Kuzmenko's better than a stopgap, which is why teams would want to trade for him and they wouldn't want to trade for Anthony Bovillier, right? Like, I think that's what it boils down to. And it just boils down to where the Canucks are in their process. And I don't want to rehash this whole conversation again. I like Andrei Kuzmenko, the player. The contract in a vacuum is absolutely fine. I just look at this, and again, last night is just an example of it where you say, like, man, like, when you have Elias Pettersson, it almost doesn't really matter who your wingers are, right? Like, Lane Peterson almost looked like a capable top six forward alongside Elias Pettersson for 3 games. And again, like, that's another extreme. So it's not saying that it's either Kuzmenko or Peterson, but something in the middle, right? Like, you could have had it both ways, it feels like. And again, I don't want to rehash this whole conversation. It was just one of my observations from last night was that, yeah, like, Bovillier had a great game, and it happened because he was playing with Pettersson.
I also think that Bovillier. Okay, I want to explain this correctly because this is something that I think Pettersson does so well, and I think really good NHL teams, like the best teams in the league, do this incredibly well. And it's getting yourself into a shooting position and then making a kind of almost fake shot pass into a backdoor tap in. Like, really good teams, this happens to the Canucks all the time because they get scored on like this so often. And the only guys who are really doing it for the Canucks scoring this way is Elias Pettersson. And there was a play against the Devils where Pettersson was coming on the right wing, and it was like, so this is what, Bovillier's first game with them, so it's like I wasn't expecting it, but Pettersson like fired a puck through the ice into the area where Bovillier was, and his stick was like up in the air, right? Because he's like going to the net and bodying someone. When you're playing with Pettersson, that stick needs to be on the ice. Like, that's the thing. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing on Bovillier, because maybe he's not played with players who like to score that type of backdoor kind of fake shot goal with a tap in. Instead, like, he just went to the net hard with a stick up in the air ready to bang against a body. And that's totally fine, but I think it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment period. And we've seen Kuzmenko have that immediate adjustment. Like, watch Kuzmenko go to the net. His stick is on the ice. Every single time when he's on the ice with Elias Pettersson, he goes to the net with his stick on the ice. And that's so important. I think if Bovillier develops that would be great too. And that's going to help him a ton with his goal scoring output. So that's great. But I get back to it. And I just think, like, you got to build a little bit of chemistry with Pettersson to really find it, unless you automatically have that mentality of, hey, I'm just going to be a tap-in guy. Then it's like almost like it immediately works because Pettersson just sees the ice so well and thinks it at such a high level. It's what you see from good teams consistently, or what you see the Canucks get scored on consistently with, is that get into a danger area, make the goalie come out, and find the backdoor tap in with a really hard pass. And I think that's something that's going to develop. I think that's something that Brock Besser hasn't necessarily developed with Pettersson. Even in the amount of time they've played together, it's not like that's something that Besser's been incredible at. If he can find that, like somebody out there is going to get a bunch of free, easy goals playing with Elias Pettersson if you just do that one thing correctly. And it might be Bovillier, it might be Besser. It's going to consistently continue to be Andrei Kuzmenko because he gets it. But if you can find another winger who can do that, like then you're talking about a line that's going to be pretty exciting on a lot of nights.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's quickly preview the game. Bo Horvat, go ahead.
Hold on, one more thing, because I know we're talking about like guys playing with Elias Pettersson. I also wrote this down last night, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. Like, to me, Luke Shen has to go back with Quinn Hughes. Like, he has to. You're going to try and trade Luke Shen for a second round pick, maybe more. I know that I thought that Bear was really good last night. I thought Ethan Bear maybe was the best defenseman last night for the Vancouver Canucks. Like, I thought he was really good. I think he made one pretty bad mistake that actually resulted in a goal against. But throughout the game, like, he made a lot of crisp passes. And when you're playing with Quinn Hughes as your partner, it kind of sticks out because you're like, wow, Bear's moving the puck a lot with Hughes as his partner. That makes life a lot easier on Quinn Hughes. And that's great. But I just think that, like, right now in the point where you're at with the trade deadline coming up here, like that final kind of 3-week stretch, like play Luke Shen with Quinn Hughes. Like, there's not a lot of great tape being taken of Luke Shen right now when he's playing with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like, you're not getting anybody that excited about him. Or if the pairings get switched up and he's playing with Riley Stillman, you're like, man, like, this is not the time to play Luke Shen with OEL or Riley Stillman in my eyes. Get him with Quinn Hughes, get him looking good, get him pumping up his Corsi numbers, give him a little bit of a highlight tape in this final 3 weeks here before the deadline. I think it's a no-brainer to put Luke Shen back with Quinn Hughes at this point, even though, like I said, like Bear has been really good, I think, the last couple of games. And I think he's finding that chemistry with Quinn Hughes. It's now clicking. You hate to kind of take that away, but I think big picture, you got to look at this and think like, let's pump up Luke Shen's value a little bit here, play him with Quinn Hughes until the deadline, or at least until you trade him, I mean.
You're not going to get any pushback on that from me. I'll tell you that much. And we should also mention Nation Network's very own Nick Alberga was reporting yesterday that he thinks the Bruins and the Flames are emerging as the front runners for Luke Shen. I believe Friedman also had something in his 32 Thoughts column. But those two guys both saying that the Bruins really like Luke Shen. And you think back to Daryl Sutter's comments, obviously. Doesn't seem too hard to add Luke Shen as Tanev going down over there in Calgary.
Sorry, you cut out for a second. I lost you there.
Oh, well, I was talking Luke Shen about the trade, Calgary, Boston.
Yeah, I got the gist of it, but not quite all of it. But yeah, that's it'll be interesting to see what happens there between Luke Shen and the options. I have to think that every team in the top 20 of the NHL would be interested in Luke Shen. Like, yeah, maybe there's some front runners, but if you're close to a playoff spot, you're likely interested in Luke Shen. It's probably just depending on what you want to give up for him, which is really good news for the Canucks because, out of the 20 teams that might be interested or in on Shen, you got to think you're getting a second out of some of them, and you might be getting more. That's kind of the good thing for Luke Shen's market. It's why I really think, like, I don't know. I don't want to rehash the Kuzmenko thing, but like it's when you're trading a player with cap hits that are under $1 million, you should be able to get a lot. And you could, because you'll have a lot of teams interested. You'll have a lot of teams bidding. You'll have a lot of teams calling with an offer, and then you compare offers. Like, I just think that when your cap hit's that low, man, I think there's going to be a lot of interest here for Shen. So I say get him with Hughes for the next little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Bo Horvat making his not return to Rogers Arena, but making his debut, I guess, against the Canucks. For the first time, Bo Horvat is going to be on the other side when the Islanders and Canucks face off tonight. Obviously, for the pod, won't take too long to talk about this, but I'll ask you this, Chris. Bo was asked about this pregame. What do you think is the biggest hit on him? If Luke Shen's in the line, obviously, but he Miller or Garland is going to give him the toughest time tonight.
Yeah, I think it depends, because you know what? They'll probably have, like, I wonder if Horvat gets the Pettersson matchup. Like, that would be interesting, right? Or they might just kind of, like, it's not like that line's going to be, crushing Horvat. But yeah, I think, it'd be kind of fun to get Luke Shen hidden there. But at the same time, like, I don't know. We'll get to our bets in a little bit here, but like, the only thing I look at tonight's game is like Horvat's 100% scoring a goal. Like, it's like, I don't know how many goals he's going to score. He is 100% going to score a goal tonight as the Canucks are on the second of back-to-back. Horvat just had the crowd chanting his name. I know we still got the video up there from Randy Jan.
Standing ovation for Bo Horvat. His first game as an Islander.
Like,
what's the chant here, guys? We might need to work on that.
yeah, they maybe have worked on that at this point. We'll see whatever they do tonight with the Horvat. Like, if he scores, I hope that arena goes nuts for them. And this, I got the Bovillier, Bo Horvat jersey up there right now. We got to talk to Al Murdoch, see if he's going to do the Bo thing. But I don't know. I want Horvat to have success. I also want the Islanders to lose a ton of games over the next 18 months. So, like, I don't know how I feel about tonight.
Okay, to answer the question, I think Elias Pettersson gets a nice reverse hit on Bo Horvat tonight. I'll tell you that. I think that's the big hit that surprises everybody is Elias Pettersson. Okay, Betway, get us out of here.
All right, let's get that up here, Betway. Like I said, Bo Horvat to score tonight. They've still, when I checked this at what time would it have been? About 11:30, yeah, because that's when I woke up. But when I checked this at 11:30, Bo Horvat plus 140 to score a goal. Like, you bet a $10 bet's going to return you 24. I don't know. Like, I don't have a house, but if I had one, be on this bet for Bo Horvat to score. And then our second bet, over 6.5 total goals in the game between the two teams, and Elias Pettersson to score 2 or more points. So I've been taking out the picking who's going to win, but I like the over 6.5 in a lot of Canucks games, and then just kind of going with a player with 2 or more points in this one. So tonight we're going with over 6.5 total goals in the game between the two teams, and Elias Pettersson to get 2 or more points, plus 300 on that bet right there. A $10 bet's going to return you 40 over on Betway.
19 plus. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. People were pointing out I was lagging. Me, being the tech guru I am, realized that I plugged in my Ethernet cable because I was like, okay, wired connection, I won't lag at all. I didn't switch over from Wi-Fi to Ethernet. So I've been on Wi-Fi this whole time, and now I just made the switch. So now I won't lag. Just in time to close out the show, Chris, but it's good prep for when the pup comes.
There you go. Well, yeah, no, it was good for most of the show. There was some stuff later in the end, and I was wondering, because you never know. Is it me? Is it him? Who's the problem here? But just like the prep for the show and waking up and everything, it wasn't my problem. I didn't screw anything up today, so don't worry about that. And you're off to your weekend here. I know Harm. I already text Harm. He's in tomorrow, so excited for that one. How many goals Bo Horvat going to score tonight?
Genuinely, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
What is?
A hat trick. Like, a hat trick is not out of the realm of possibility. That would be so fitting for him to get a hat trick in his first game. Like, his first hat trick as an Islander. Like, he would get to, 35 goals if he scores a hat trick tonight? It's doable.
Yeah, that would be wild. I really hope that when he does score tonight, it's not great for the Canucks, but I hope that Islanders team go, the fan base, I hope they go nuts. Because think about it, they're going to be, I think, at least kind of the vibe that I've gotten on Anthony Bovillier is that everybody, a lot of people in that Islanders fan base really liked him. Because I think he had some really good moments in the playoffs for them. And he was, a solid player that I think was very well liked in that organization from the fan base. So I think they're going to give him a nice little video tonight. They'll be excited about that. But I want to see is when Horvat scores, that's in New York, they got to light it up. Let him know how excited they are about him. I think that's going to be a great moment tonight when that happens. And hey, maybe, just another, I'm hopeful again for a team that's fun to watch lose, right? I hope they are fun to watch and they lose. I think that would be something that would be great tonight, and continue on with that tank. Get yourself as close to Connor Bedard as possible. Let's, see another game from Vasily Podkolzin. I think he's been pretty solid since coming back to the NHL. Scores the goal last night, obviously. We'll see what he does. I think, get another good game from him. Pettersson with some different line mates potentially. We'll see it moved around. There's a lot to get to, but tonight's going to be an exciting one for sure. What time's puck drop tonight? 4 o'clock or is it 4:30?
4:30 Pacific tonight.
Okay. Good. I'm excited for it. I like the 4 o'clock games.
All right. Well, we'll close it out there. I'll see you folks on Monday. You know what? I'm kind of sad that I'm not going to be on the show tomorrow. I might join for a guest spot. We'll see how tomorrow goes.
No, we're actually good. We're all right.
We'll close it out there. For my co-host, Chris Faber, and our technical producer, Alex Allard, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation.
Yeah, wrap it up. Lock the doors. You're not coming, Quads.
Thanks for listening to Canucks Conversation. Hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.
How about keep it to a thank you, Jim?